Okay, 1 second. If I do an Israeli accent, will it get me extra points? Just kidding. Okay. I will be starting in 3, 2, 1. Three main cases that you're going to get from OG. Firstly, why the fall of Assad gave Israel an opportunity to gain strategic achievements that help it in this war. Secondly, why Assad falling weakened Iran in general and how that benefits Israel. And thirdly, why the next power in Syria in the long term will probably be less hostile towards Israel in the future. Let's get into it. First of all, let's talk about all of the strategic things that Israel has achieved because Assad fell. What happened in real life? Okay, Israel attacked southern Syria a lot. It attacked a lot of places and it did two main things. Firstly, it widened the security belt around the Golan Heights. What does that mean? It means that 2 weeks ago, there were Jewish and Druze settlements that were literally something like 2, 3, 4, 5 kilometers from places where missiles from Syria were being shot at them. It means that now we took more territory and there's something like 10 or 20 kilometers which are absolutely safe and clean. Which means that now there is a lesser chance of people in the Golan Heights and in the northern Israel in general being attacked and stuff like that. But secondly, what Israel also did is she took down a lot of Assad's weapon depots. What does that mean? It means that a lot of the long-range missiles and a lot of the missile equipment that was in Syria is now no longer existence or no longer in a functioning capacity. Why it wouldn't have happened without Assad falling? A couple of reasons. First of all, we are not in a place, or Israel is not in a place, that it can open another conflict with another country. What do I mean by that? With Syria, we had some offshoots, but we didn't have a major conflict. Right now, the Israeli army is spread fucking thin. We only finished the war in Lebanon. We're still in the middle of the war in Gaza. We do not have enough resources and we do not have enough army to open a huge front in Syria, or at least it's not strategic. So the only reason that Israel allowed itself to do it is because she knew there wouldn't be a lot of retaliation because there isn't a strong regime that can actually retaliate. Secondly, Israel would have received a lot more backlash from the international community if it wasn't seen as a unique opportunity. Okay, well, Assad fell, we understand why they want to do it. If we would have just attacked out of nowhere, it wouldn't have received that way and Israel wouldn't have done it. But thirdly, just honestly, it's a lot easier to achieve all of those strategic things when there is disarray in the country, right? When there's no one leadership, when the military is all over the place. Let's talk about what are the impacts of this and why they're so good for Israel. And when I'm saying Israel, I do not mean Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm talking about the actual citizens in Israel who mainly want to not die in a war and want to live our life peacefully. First of all, the extra tens of kilometers of safety and distance from active shooting means that tens of thousands of people who live in the north can now sleep more soundly at night. Literally, they have a smaller chance of dying. They know that there are less missiles that are possible to be projected at them, that their kids can have nights with less nightmares of missiles and all of those things. Secondly, obviously, the reduced military capability means that Israel needs to waste less of its resources on the Golan Heights and on Syria. What does that mean? It means that they can put more of its efforts, more of its army, more of its money in other more needed places, whether it be more active zones of war like in Gaza, or whether it be into actually making the economy better, giving more benefits for all of the people that were hurt in the war, and things like that. Before I move on to why Assad falling weakened Iran in general, yes, POI. Zero.
All of these are reasons for why Israel will not engage in conflict with Syria, which is untrue given the fact that they have launched missiles in the past week on Damascus. These are not reasons why Syria might have actions that cause Israel to invade in the future. So, what are
Okay.
your reasons to prevent those?
Okay, please notice that war is not a zero-sum game. It's not one or zero. It's not everything or nothing. There was a bit of shootouts into Syria, but there wasn't this dedicated huge attack that actually eradicated their attack possibility because of the reasons that I gave you now. Let's talk about why Assad falling weakened Iran very significantly. First of all, why do we believe that it weakened Iran? First reason, most simple terms, Assad was an Iranian proxy. His regime was a key part of the Iranian proxy system. His losing cost Iran lots of money and resources when they were trying to save him, now that they need to actually take him in, and it made it look very weak in the eyes of the rest of the Middle East. But also, please notice that Syria was a very strategic place for Iran, specifically for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it was a key place for Russia, which is one of Iran's biggest supporters, which is actually one of the biggest countries that are still trading with them, giving them money, etc. Russia had a lot of interest in that region, and the fact that Iran could make it more beneficial to Russia, that it could let Russian ships dock there, was a huge part of why the relationship is so close. Secondly, it gave Iran the ability to help give weapons and other type of resources to other Iranian-backed groups. For example, a lot of Hezbollah's weapons that are in Lebanon actually come through Syria, and it was a key strategic point for Iran. And thirdly, in general, Iran is always in a soft power war with Saudi Arabia and with other Shia more less extreme groups, right? So it doesn't even matter that it was Syria specifically. The mere fact that Iran lost another country means that other countries in the Middle East now feel less safe about Iran and will go more towards Saudi Arabia. What are the impacts here? You know what? No, I'll leave it to Jessica. Let's go into why the next power in Syria will be less hostile towards Israel in the future. First of all, we do believe that Kurdish and Turkish forces will probably have a significant amount of power, right? Why? First of all, because we do not think that the HTS is powerful enough to rule all of Syria by its own at the moment. The win was something that all of three of them did. Obviously, both Turkey and the USA are very powerful forces that want the key strategic region that is Syria, so most probably they will actually back those groups, give them quite a lot of money and give them an advantage. And I think that it's pretty obvious why US and yes, even Turkey that doesn't love Israel that much is a lot less hostile and a lot less extremist than an Iranian-backed group. But even if the HTS is the one that will take control, even if an Islamist group will take control in the long run. Second reason, we think they will be better and less hostile towards Israel, because they will probably want to distance themselves from Iran, right? Most Middle Eastern countries, again, are in a dance between Iran and the more moderate countries. When we see that the force that was pro-Iranian lost, and when we there was so much hate towards that pro-Iranian regime. When that pro-Iranian regime killed children in a war that lasted for a decade, the last thing you want to do is to go to Iran. You can still say that Israel is bad, you can still support the Palestinians. But in most of those countries, what happens is that they go to Saudi Arabia, they go to the UAE, to countries that actually want to normalize the relations with Israel and that will not allow you to be their ally if you're going to shoot missiles at them. And thirdly, we just believe that in general, new unstable regime in a country that was just wreaked havoc in a civil war just can take less risk, right? They have other priorities. They have to, for at least a couple of years, get their shit together, and they cannot afford the war with Israel. For all of those reasons, please us.
Thank you so much for this wonderful speech. And with this, I would like to welcome Leader of Opposition.
Hi, am I fully visible and audible?
Yep.
Great. I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. My first case will be on why this ends the war and why the comparative is a continued war and why continued chaos and civil war in Syria are good for Israel. My second case will be why Israel gets incentivized to enter Syria. I agree with OG on that, but this is an absolute honey trap that's going to set Israel up for decades of further conflict. And my third case, if I get to it, will be about why Islamists are the ones who are likely to rise and be a very big danger to Israel, and why it's better to have Assad or any other military dictator. Starting with why this ends the war and why the comparative is Assad. It ends the war because the two main factions have an incentive to cooperate. We're talking about the Turkish-backed SNA and the HTS who took Damascus. The two of them have been relatively evenly matched throughout the war. They already have a hard-set border between Idlib and the northern provinces taken by Turkey. If they also, and this is because both of them come from the north of Syria and have been focused on fighting Assad. They also have relatively matching ideologies in the sense that even though the SNA support Turkey because Turkey supports them, their primary incentive is still Islamism and militantism, which means that the only degree to which they want to support Turkey is to make sure that Turkey in the north are protected. Insofar as the SNA have a unique incentive, their incentive is anti-Kurdish, not anti-HTS. Beyond that, there's no hatred between these two organizations as there was versus Assad, who continuously used weapons of like terrible weapons, chemical weapons, biological weapons against their people. Finally, there's a desire for internal stability in order to rebuild the state and flood in support. The HTS especially fears that America will oppose them, or that Iran will seek to retribute against them, or Russia because of the loss of their allies, and America accuses them of terrorism. So they would love to welcome in Turkish support and be welcomed in as a Turkish ally, which means they have all the incentive to cooperate with the SNA. The Kurds may remain autonomous and on hold, but Arab Syria will, for the first time in almost 15 years, be united. Why is the comparative Assad with continued war? Note first, Assad has been unable to gain grounds for years. There's deep hatred of him, and the same factors that made him weak and susceptible to failing still exist. Iran and Hezbollah and Russia as allies are too busy to support him, which means he doesn't fall, but he's not able to advance. He's able to at least hold on to Damascus and the rich Alawi coast, probably also the city of Homs, which means that the war continues to grind on in the same stalemate it's been in for a long time. Why is continued chaos and civil war weakening to Syria, and how is this good for Israel? First, it harms the economy by making people refugees from the country, deterring investors, as well as practically destroying homes, roads, infrastructure, and the industry itself. Secondly, there's a destruction of military means, constant loss of fighters to this internal civil war, constant loss of stockpiled weapons, destructions of heavy weaponry, such as planes or tanks. Thirdly, there's a loss of sovereignty. It becomes a welcome place for neighboring forces to intervene in and clash against each other, i.e. Turkey, Iran, militias from Iraq or Lebanon, the USA, all of which harm Syria's ability to be a threat to any external body. Finally, continued civil war makes it far easier for Israel to operate in Syria, and the operations seem a lot more legitimate. Operations versus Assad or his allies, he's seen as a tyrannical rule with no mandate to rule, who kills his own people and is a pariah among the international community. That means you can assassinate generals of the Syrian army or destroy Syrian stockpiles freely. Versus other militias and other foreign troops, they're all seen as interventionists. None of them are protected by the fact that they have sovereignty on their own grounds. It's far easier to destroy supplies from Iran or Iranian generals in Syria rather than in Iran itself. Note how you all know that Iran is currently weaker than they ever have been, because you know that this is and if you read the news, you know that this is one of the reasons why Assad has been able to fall. But you should also know that Israel has done minimal strikes in Iran, mostly minor strikes in retaliation for strikes that Iran did against Israel. The vast majority of harm Israel was able to cause Iran was in Syria, where they could attack their forces freely. On the comparative, unified Arab Syria even has mandate. They have unity. They have a recovering economy. They start accumulating military means. They have a sense of sovereignty. And now they have a continued fear of Israel, who are warmongering, a decades-long commitment to war. Technically, the countries are still at war. They never signed a peace deal. They never signed a peace commitment. All they signed was a truce, and the truce has gone on for 50 years, but not really. There's been continuous cross-border war attacks throughout that year. Finally, note this is the only neighbor Israel is still at war with Syria, with both Jordan and Egypt. Israel has decades-long peace agreements, but they also have a desire to show solidarity with Palestinian Islamists. All of this shows that Syria will have dramatically increased capacity to harm Israel and over time, this capacity will only increase instead of status quo, where there's simply no threat and Israel doesn't need to invade in the first place. Let's take a PR from closing.
I think the problem with this argument is that Assad has been in power for like the last 10 years, and there have only been low-level skirmishes in Syria. You just can't empirically prove that this
low-level skirmishes? Hundreds of thousands of people have died. There have been nonstop wars. Cities have gone back and forth countless times. What the heck are you talking about? Okay, why is Israel more incentivized to enter Syria? But this is a honey trap. OG can see they're more incentivized. They talk about how Israel is already invaded halfway to Damascus, and they say that they want to maintain the security of the Golan Heights by militarily occupying that region. But note also that the current government seeks endless war, so they're never held to account for the 7th of October. And the extremists and Judeo-fascists in government have a strong desire to establish settlements and create a greater Israel. What happens though when you enter Syria? First, you lose the existing defensive lines you've built along the border that you've built over 50 years. These are bunkers, these are sonar and radar, these are minefields, these are 50 years worth of built up defenses. Secondly, you have to do a military occupation now, which means you either have to do an ethnic cleansing of the area, which is a horrible thing to do and leads to immense backlash, or you have to continuously occupy a territory where people hate you, which, as Israel experienced during the occupation of Gaza before 2005, means that before 2005, means that you constantly have soldiers dying and being killed. It means that you constantly have endless opportunity and incentive for locals to do terror and engage against your soldiers. But I think the most likely thing to happen is settlements. OG say that there are Israeli communities on the very border between Israel and Syria. Yeah, Those were built there after the Golan Heights were conquered, because Israel doesn't believe in having unsettled defensive land. They believe the only way to protect land is to settle it. That's why they settled along the borders in 1947. That's why they settled deep in the West Bank. That's why they settled the Golan Heights. They do this because they believe that soldiers are only willing to lay down their life in defense of citizens, and because it's far easier to protect civilian communities. All of this means that there is going to be massive renewal of hatred for Israel in Syria. There's going to be renewed fear of Israel in Jordan and Egypt because it shows a desire to spread beyond its very borders. And it re-instigates global anti-Israel sentiment because now Israel is a warmonger that beats a country while they're down. For all of these reasons, go with opening opposition.
Thank you so much for this wonderful speech. And with this, I would like to welcome Deputy Prime Minister here.
Am I clearly audible?
Yep.
Cool. I will start in 3, 2, 1. Three main ways we won this debate. First, we show why Israel got strategic up ahead in the worst case scenario that OO is right and we will be at war with Syria, meaning that we have higher points to shoot it from for Syrian soldiers, meaning that we destroyed an infinite amount of weaponry, things that didn't happen factually until now, no matter how much Ayal is going to bullshit you. The second way we're winning this debate is showing you why we have a better relationship with the new with the new Syrian government, as Netanyahu stated in his Facebook himself. And the third way is how we is simply how we weakened Iran. Before I dive into it, an important point for me. Israel is currently at war with Iran. Yes, you hear about Hamas. Yes, you hear about Hezbollah. But the country who is funding them, but the country who is actively giving them weapons, but the country who says if they can't not attack is Iran. Iran is the country that swears that her end goal is to kill each and every Israeli. Iran is the country that threatens Israel with nuclear weapons, which means that even if you didn't buy shit, we said before, the moment Rina showed you that Iran is getting weaker, this is clearly the main threat. Israel will be in a war with Syria. Let's dive into the lies Ayal tell you. It's easier to kill supplies in Syria. Yes, we agree. We think that when supplies, because Iran has no interest of sending supplies that could go to hundreds of kilometers to Hezbollah and to Hamas. They simply do not threaten Israel because Israel is here. Is far away, so yes, we prefer to stay in Iraq and not half of them being destroyed in Syria and half of them landing on the homes of the Israeli citizens. What's the second lie Ayal tells you? He says, there was a horrible war. Yes, there was a war, but Assad was a dictator. He killed people with gas. He killed people with weapons. He did have rebels, but as long as he's been supported by Syria, by Iran and Russia, he was able to kill them. How do you know this? Because right now Israel destroyed countless weapons. Israel destroyed chemical weapons. Israel destroyed ammunition. If opening a position is right, and the forces who are going to come into Syria are bad ones, we prefer them not to have this, but we also prefer them not to have this as long as he's aligned with the force who swore to kill Israel. The last bullshit Ayal tells you, and then we'll go on to talk a little bit about the interest of Israel. Is going to settle them. What an enormous amount of bullshit. Netanyahu already released a statement saying that Israel does not want to settle them on his public Facebook page. He said that this is a strategic idea that we're meant to hold via military. No, that we meant to hold via military till there will be a Syrian government, and we want peace with the Syrian government. Netanyahu knows that there is a currently Hague procedure going against him, and he knows that if he's caught in a lie, it's another piece of evidence against him. Two, it's not part of the things that Tanakh promised. And unlike Ayosh,
Judah and Samaria.
Judah and Samaria, which some crazy settlers does want to settle because it was promised to them in the Tanakh. Syria is not part of them, so you do not have religious justification to go there, and people will not sacrifice their life if they do not have a strong religious justification. But the third point of the matter is that those people who live there literally says, please, Israel, come to us, which means that they come to us in peace. When the Israelis are not afraid of this specific border being attacked, but they're afraid of the fact that when Syria stays in control, it can send military to this border. It has no reason to send citizens there when the Druze saying they will happily stay alive. Before I continue, I would like an extension, please. Okay, no extension. PI opening.
Bibi committed to Obama he won't expand settlements in the West Bank, and then he did. He committed there wouldn't be settlements in Gaza. No one believes him. He committed not to sit in government with Ben Gvir, and then he made a minister of police. Bibi promises things all the time.
I understand. At this point, Bibi doesn't have an active legal procedure against him, and he didn't need to be accountable for every word. Bibi doesn't want to end up in prison. Bibi doesn't want to. This is exactly the moment. Besides the fact that Bibi already met with the leader of the Druze, saying that he doesn't want to go there. What does the Israeli want? I think the opposition position agrees with us that the Israeli want less people dying, that the Israeli want weaker Iran with less weaponry, and then the Israeli want an ability to actually put its forces where it's attacked. How to achieve those goals? On the first level, when Rina comes up and tells you that Iran is now weaker, on the first level, Russia has less of an interest keeping its alliance to it, which means that Iran actively loses money and weapons. This money and weapons are not getting to the border of Israel, not to Syria, but also Iran just has less ability. On the second level, now Israel conquered strategic point. Israel conquered high mountains from which they can actually shoot at people if there will be a war with Syria. Israel destroyed ammunition that could have been used against it. So in the worst case scenario, in which opposing opposition it is right, the forces would like to attack Israel, which they will do on both sides by Ayal analysis. If they so jihadistic and hate Israel so much, Israel would be in a much better stance in the long term. But I think that the most important thing is that Israel actually has a chance for peace. There is now a new government who does not want to find itself in a war with Israel. There are now fractions in Syria calling to be annexed to us. Benjamin Netanyahu can continue the war on other fronts. It's in his interest to make peace with Syria. This is the way to save lives. We clearly want.
Thank you so much for this wonderful speech. And with this, I would like to welcome Deputy Leader of Opposition to close the top half. Here.
Hello, I'll take POIs only in the chat, please. Give me a moment. If it is in Israel's incentive to not create war in Syria and to make peace with Syria, it is better not to enter militarily in the first place. What Israel needs right now is de-escalation, not more escalation of the conflict. The primary case coming from opening opposition is that there will be significantly more hatred of Israel, both within Syria, within the Middle East at large, and globally, because of the fall of the Assad empire, or rather of the Assad regime. But before I defend this case against the attacks coming from opening government, I want to be a bit more offensive when it comes to their alleged strategic benefits of destroying the military infrastructure in the Golan Heights. A couple of points here. Note that right now, Israel has strong defensive capabilities due to the Iron Dome system. So yes, while it is inconvenient for the people living there to have to deal with sirens every single day, there is still a reasonable degree of safety given the highly complex defense system that Israel is continually investing in, given that it has also a parallel war in Gaza going on, which means that there isn't a massive death toll of Israelis happening there. But secondly, note that Hezbollah has inferior technology there because Hezbollah is currently being ravaged in Lebanon, so they don't have the capacity to pose a serious threat to Israel in the Golan Heights in the first place. OG just asserts and assumes that you know that there is a threat in the Golan Heights, but they never prove why Hezbollah has the capacity to cause significant damage to Israel. But thirdly, what they say, and this is the nuance in their case, they say it's a waste of resources for Israel to put their defensive capacities in the north. Sure, but note that Israel is very wealthy and can afford to reallocate people because of the large defensive budget that Bibi has increased ever since the war. And note, it's also a huge waste of resources to start a war on another front and to enter a different country. Why? Because Israel is already investing a lot of money in its active conflicts, both in Lebanon and in Gaza, which requires boots on the ground. It requires technology, but also surveillance technology. You need to have spies in Iran, you need to have them in Yemen, and you need to have them in Gaza and Lebanon. Moving into Syria requires you to divest your military resources into this conflict, which makes you less capable of waging wars on more proximate fronts that are going on right now with Israel. But secondly, their second push coming from Prime Minister is that now countries in the Middle East are going to have less trust in Iran because an Iran-backed regime is toppled. I have four responses to this. The first one is that no one really saw Syria as a success story in the first place or a reason to ally with Iran. That's because, as Ayal analyzed, and we got no response to, Syria was a weak state for 10 years before it dropped. Assad was getting assaulted on all fronts and he had a very weak grip on the country, which means that no one looked to Syria as an example to ally with Iran in the first place because Iran was incapable of securing power in Syria, which has been ravaged by civil war for 10 years. But secondly, countries are now going to be threatened by Israel because now countries are going to see that Israel is capable of taking offensive military actions when they are weak. So even if they don't see Iran as being super powerful, they're still more likely to turn to Iran because now they know they need active defense against Israel because Israel has shown that it's prepared to enter your country as soon as an internal crisis happens, which means that more countries are going to preemptively ally with Iran because they're going to fear this response. But thirdly, note that there is an ideological split here. OG has a weird comparative where they say every single country has a choice between allying with Saudi Arabia or Syria. But note that Syria is Shia, or not Syria, but Iran is Shia and Saudi Arabia is Sunni, which means a lot of countries simply have deep religious divides by which they don't have this binary choice. And Turkey, by the way, as Ayal analyzed, is in the NATO anyway, so it's unlikely that Turkey is going to suddenly completely change all of its incentives. But let's move on to the main case, and I'll take your POI after I deal with you, about why there's going to be more hatred of Israel. Ayal analyzed extensively why there are going to be more settlements in the Golan Heights. We basically get one response here, and that is the Netanyahu pledged on his Facebook page that he won't enter. Netanyahu is a man who is famous for lying. Here is why he is likely to enter anyway. The first reason is that you want to give wrong info to your enemies and to say something publicly because the enemies don't expect it. Netanyahu has said multiple times, both to appease his constituents and to surprise Hamas, that he is close to releasing a hostage deal, and then he has proven that he isn't close, which means that he has a precedent of lying. But secondly, this region has historically belonged to Israel, which means that a lot of Israelis, both within the coalition that happens within the country and of the constituents, see it as being extremely important to them. But secondly, they can use the same excuse that OG uses. OG says that it's very important to protect people in the north of Israel. You know what protects people in the north of Israel? Settlements. Because when you have settlements, then you have more of a legal justification to be violent in the future and to protect them. So Bibi knows that he can justify this to the courts and to the people if he takes it. And most of the Israelis actually support this because they have suffered the trauma of the October 7, so they want to be more warmongery. So Bibi has all the incentives to resettle this. Before I explain why this is bad, I'm happy to take a POI from closing.
You first told us that like Israel doesn't need more capacity because its military is well funded, and then that spending money in Syria will take it away from combating Iran or Lebanon. Those both can't be true.
No, so here is the logical chain. In response to OG, Israel has enough money, but insofar as budgeting is the problem, then this is more costly. That's how the logical chain goes. But fourthly, note that courts will not impeach Bibi during the war, so this entire legal argument is very arbitrary. Bibi is already entangled with a ton of legal scandals and he has lied in the past. Why is this going to lead to a massive hatred of Israel? A couple of reasons. Note that within Syria, the people are now seeing that Israel is aggressively invading them at the time of them achieving liberation. This means that all of the people who both support this for secular reasons and the Islamists are now going to see Israel as the biggest threat in the region again. Previous to this, people in Syria did not care about Israel because Assad was the main bad guy. So the counterfactual is that the people within Syria aren't as radicalized and anti-Israel because they're focused on fighting Assad, which means that in the counterfactual, people would not have the incentive to fight against Israel as much within Syria, but also in the broader Middle East. Note that Egypt and Jordan are worried about Israel having settlements within the east side of the Jordan River and within the Sinai Desert in Egypt, which means that Egypt and Jordan will now fear that Israel can escalate again. And globally, people will see that Israel is not just attacking Gaza, it's being more aggressive in the region overall, which means that Israel will have less soft power and less trust among other Middle East countries, which enables all of Ayal's weighing. For these reasons, OO wins this debate.
Thank you so much for this wonderful speech. And with this, I would like to welcome members of government to open the back half. Here.
All right, POIs in chat, please.
Sorry,
Starting-
just beforehand. Do you consent to recording or do you want to do it after the round?
I'll say withdraw consent for now. Apologies.